In this section of the tutorial, we're going to configure the user interface artifacts that allow users to create, edit, and execute actions against the policy objects. We'll be configuring instance pages, expressions, and a context menu. Instance pages are for creating, editing, and viewing instances of your business objects, content objects, folders, etc. xCP applications can auto-generate these instances by using the object models as a guide. So, when developing a quality production application, you might want to spend more time creating your own layout. These auto-generated pages will still be helpful as they will at least provide all the needed widgets, pre-bound to interactions, and provide a starting place for your own custom layout. A context menu is normally thought of as the menu that pops up when you right-click on something. In xCP Designer, when the user either right-clicks on an entry in a results list widget, or when they expand the action menu of a selector widget, if an xCP context menu is defined for that object, the corresponding context menu will appear with the menu items that link to the actions that can be performed on that object at runtime. Expressions are used in various places throughout xCP Designer. For example, you might want to use conditional logic to determine whether to perform some action or to compute a result based on some inputs, such as hiding or disabling a widget on a page, or computing a value to display on a page, or maybe determining which flow to follow in a business process. In xCP2, the language used for these expressions was unified. You're going to get to use xCP expressions in lots of places in this tutorial. In the xCP Designer help, there's a list of situations where expressions can be used. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If we go to the User Interface tab, you can see where we have business object types with instance pages defined. If we look at the Create instance page for policy, they're always named Create or Edit or View, and then the type name. You can see that the field names, first name, last name, address, coverage, and end date, these are field names that were defined in the object type. There's also a Create button. The Create button is generally placed way over to the right, and I like to slide it to the left to keep people from having to horizontally scroll. The Cancel button is one that is not included by default, but it's a good idea to put one on. You can also see that for Content UI, there's a View instance page. For Folder UI, there's a View instance page. So if we went back to Vehicle, there aren't any instance pages for this now. If I did New Instance Page, you can get an idea what's happening. So you have Create, View, and Edit instance pages. Watch the label as I select one to the next. Create, View, and Edit. If I selected the Edit instance page, it'll build one for me and lay out some of the fields based on how the vehicle object type was defined. So there's my vehicle object type, and you can see I have model, make, VIN, and year, and then a couple of relationships which you haven't seen yet. So model, make, VIN, and year. And then over here to the right, there's a Save button, which I often change to Create or Submit. And I also almost always slide it over to the left side so people don't have to horizontally scroll. That action goes to the Update data service. And these are already bound for you, so the instance pages are quite handy. Let me get rid of this. The other thing I want to show you in this section of the tutorial is context menus. So if you look at the vehicle and the policy objects, you can see that we've defined a context menu for every single one of our object types. Every single one of them. And you'll probably want to do that too. The reason for that is if they ever magically show up in a results list somewhere, you want the users to be able to right-click on them and do things with them. For example, let's take a look at the policy. So very often when you create a context menu, a whole bunch of extra things like cut, copy, and paste and stuff like that will show up. It depends on how many other things that you have going on in your application. So we have an edit policy and a delete policy. You can see that they're linked down here to the delete policy is going to do the delete data service, and the edit policy is going to link to a page, and that's going to be the edit policy page that we're going to define. Okay. And of course, the third topic that we're going to discuss in this section of the tutorial is expressions, and I'll show you those when we get to them. Next, we're going to configure a Create Policy instance page. It appears when the user creates a new instance of a policy object, and it provides a user interface to enter the values for the fields. In the xCP Navigator pane on the left, select the User Interface tab. expand the Business Objects UI node, right-click on Policy, and select New Page. Be sure that the Specific Object Model field has Policy selected. Down in this section, select the Create Policy Radio button. The options in this section will create various interactions and bind them to widgets that it creates for you that represent the selected object model. The label changes to Create Policy for you, and then click Finish. The Create Policy page is created with all the custom attributes that you define in the Policy Business Object. If the page opens but there are no widgets, it means you probably didn't save the Policy module. Drag and drop the widgets to rearrange the order with first name, then last name, then address, coverage, and end date. Now we can demonstrate the use of expressions by converting the name fields to uppercase when the user clicks the Create button. Now we can demonstrate the use of expressions by converting the name fields to uppercase when the user clicks the Create button. Expand the Interactions pane and select the Create Policy Interaction instance that was automatically generated and bound to this page. It defines how information from the widgets on the page are passed to the Documentum repository when the policy is created. With the Create Policy Interaction selected, in the Properties pane at the bottom, select the Inputs tab. Notice that most of the inputs are coming directly from the various widgets. We're hoping to change the expressions for first name and last name. There are two ways to enter expressions. One is to enter the expression directly, and this is the quick and easy way to do it if you know the variables, objects, and syntax. The other method is to use the expression wizard. It's the little ellipse button on the right. Let's expand the Properties pane a bit so we can see the whole thing. On the left, you see the fields from the Create Policy Data Service, or interaction. We need to map the user interface widgets to these fields so that the user's input values will be copied into the data service fields. So select first name. In the expression box at the bottom, select all the text and then click the Expression Wizard button at the right. The Selector dialog is the Expression Wizard dialog. Selector is just generic caption bar text for the Expression Wizard dialog. Select the Functions tab. In the top pane, select String to limit the list of functions in the bottom pane to just the string functions. Now in the bottom pane, select the toUpper string function, and then click OK. Inside the parentheses, enter widgets.first_name.value. Don't forget .value. Notice that as you type, the autocomplete makes it easier to determine the system names for widgets. Select last name. Copy the current expression to the clipboard using Ctrl-X, and then click the Expression Wizard button. And select the toUpper string function again. Now, using Ctrl-V, paste the expression, value of the last name field, and select outside the box to register the expression. Select the name field and enter the expression to concatenate the last name and the first name fields together, separated by a comma. Notice the use of the single quotes for the string between the variables. If we look at the bottom right of the layout, the Create, or Save button if you've renamed it, will be positioned by default to the far right. In web applications, the user's browser will often cut off such buttons and force a user to have to horizontally scroll to get to them. So let's configure those buttons so that they're aligned to the left. We do that by selecting inside the column box that contains the buttons. Then in the Properties pane at the bottom, we adjust the horizontal alignment and change it from right to left. Let's collapse the Interactions pane and select the Create button so we can configure it to open the Create Policy instance page. In the Properties pane, under the Actions section, when the Create Policy page is done, we'll have it go to the Policy search page. Now, let's add a Cancel button so that the user can abort the Create and go back to the Policy search page. we'll save and close this editor. Now let's add an Edit Policy instance page to allow the user to modify the values of an existing insurance policy. Add a Cancel button. Rearrange the widgets on the page in the same order as the Create instance page. Configure the Save button so that when the Update Policy interaction is complete, it goes back to the search page. Now let's configure a context menu for our policy objects. In the xCP Navigator in the User Interface tab, in the Business Object UI node, right-click Policy and then select Create Context Menu. When you ask xCP Designer to create a context menu, it examines the configuration of the object type and adds menu items or actions that are relevant for that type. For example, you can see that there's an Edit Policy menu item and a Delete menu item. There are also Cut and Copy menu items, and we won't be needing those. Had we configured any action flows, corresponding action flow menu items would have appeared in this context menu. It's a good practice to remove menu items that won't be used. It's also a good practice to add ... after each menu item that will pop up a dialog, like the Edit Policy menu item here. This is a long-standing user interface standard. The Delete menu item actually means Delete Policy in this case. I like to at least modify the Delete menu to add the type to it because I found a few situations where the user thought they were deleting a supporting document, but they deleted the policy instead. We'd like to prohibit changing of the policy after it's no longer active. So let's use an expression to conditionally disable the Edit Policy menu item in the case that the policy end date is passed and the policy is no longer in effect. Select the Edit Policy menu item. In the Properties pane, select the Behavior tab on the left. For the Disabled When expression, difference days, today, open close paren, comma, policy.end_date, close paren, greater than 0. Or, I often prefer to use the expression wizard to help me keep my syntax correct. Click outside the box to tell xCP Designer that you're done typing. Save the context menu and close the Policy Context Menu editor. In the interest of time, in this tutorial we won't delve deeply into user interface layout. You'll find that xCP Designer provides many options for almost complete control over the layout of an application.